Welcome back to the Israeli Bond Podcast. This is our third episode with Michael Schlank, Executive Director of Sid Jacobson JCC. Last episode, we spoke about October 7th and how it affected your life and the lesson you learned from the events of October 7th and after. And now I want to move a little bit more to the current reality. And I know that you've had many ideas, maybe after October 7th that you started to think about that are regarding to the American Jewry. So the way that American Jewry should or need to live their life, you know, at the aftermath of October 7th. So the first thing that in my research that I came across, and I was so eager to speak with you about, is that you speak about a courage over volume theory. Can you give us a brief of this?
You really did your research. You buried deep into the archives. So courage versus volume. So what I think about in this world that we live in, and I think it's not about American Jewry specifically, but it's the society that we live in. I think it is elevated and magnified in some ways in our community. The idea that the loudest person always wins, and sometimes the person who has the most tweets, or the person that says the thing that's the most provocative, or the person that says the thing that gets the most people to listen to them, isn't always right, surprisingly enough. And I think sometimes the idea of having a courageous conversation, which means that you and I can disagree with each other, and the way to win is not to try to win. The way to win is that you and I can have a courageous conversation about how I feel about something and how you feel about something, and we can agree that there's this beautiful idea in Judaism, elu ve'elu, means that just because you're right doesn't mean I'm wrong. And then we can agree that as two Jews, we look at a particular situation, whether it's a religious situation, it's a political situation, it's an economic situation, and I can respect what you have to say. I can disagree with you, but I don't need to out-yell you. I don't need to out-tweet you. I don't need to have more likes than you do on social media. And that's hard for people sometimes, because those courageous conversations and the work that comes out of courageous conversations are more difficult. They're longer term, they're strategic, and they're not tactical. And people like quick wins. And sometimes you just don't, quick wins aren't necessarily what we need in this world anymore.
So let me be the devil's advocate.
Go ahead.
Because, I'd love this courageous conversation to be, to be more popular. But at the end of the day, in order to do a courageous conversation, you need both sides of the party, right?
Correct.
And in a world of social media, at the end of the day, not everyone has an equal stage. Some stand on a stage in front of 100 people, and some stand on a stage between a couple of millions of people. I'm talking, of course, about the social media as a stage. And at the end of the day, if the algorithm is getting more reach to people that are more loud and are more for the likes, so these are, at the end of the day, if you would want it or not, these are the leaders. And I'm saying, if this is the game, yes, we would love the game to be otherwise. We would love the game to be about who speaks in more courage and who is more moral. But this is not the game. And the game is who has more likes and who has more reach. So let's play in this game, gain a lot of reach on social media. And then when we have a very big stage, we can have our opinions. The means is המטרה מקדשת את האמצעים. So the goal.
Yes. That the ends justify the means, right?
Yeah.
So I'll say two things about that. First of all, interesting statistic I saw. Only 20%, I think it was 1 in 5 people even look at Twitter ever. So 1 in 5 people, that means most people.
Which age? Which age?
Across demographics in general. Most people don't even pay attention to Twitter, right? So Twitter is one place, right? So, and why I use that for example is because many of us, me included, who spend time on social media feel like that's the world in which everyone lives. I'm not sure that's actually the case for some of these conversations. Now, is it true that our young people are getting a lot of their information from TikTok and from other, what I would say, corrosive places? 100%. So I think we hold that. In one place is that volume is sometimes accentuated more than it needs to be because we're in an echo chamber. I'm on Twitter, you're on Twitter, we're on Twitter. We think that everyone else is making decisions based on Twitter. Truth of the matter is that may not necessarily be the truth. The second piece is I would love to say, Gal, that there's some way in which the American Jewish community is going to be able to compete with the rest of the world in that arena. The facts tell me otherwise. Whether it's foreign governments or it is state actors or it is just the world of anti-Semites, it's going to be really hard for the American Jewish community to break through on social media. The dollars and the numbers are not really in our favor. And so while I would love to have this conversation should have the same 5 million followers that Tucker Carlson has, it's not going to happen, no matter how hard we try. And so, and for lots of reasons, right? And so I think what we have to think about is, do we want to continue to bang our heads against the same wall and look for, and try to get through that wall? Or do we want to figure out where the door is to go around? And that's unsatisfying for people. We want to, listen, we use social media. In my job, we use it all the time, right? But it's to speak to a very small group of people. Do I think that we're going to be able to out social media the Qataris or the Chinese? I don't think that's a likely case. If you look at October 7th, look at the social media campaign that happened on October 7th, clearly funded by non-state state actors. I don't care how good we are at social media. We weren't about to beat that. We weren't about to win in that arena. So that's the courage versus volume. It may sound a little defeatist, and maybe that's not what everyone wants to hear, and it's only one person's opinion. And I don't pretend to hold the answers, but I'm not sure that our goal should be to out yell to try to figure out how we can get on top of the soapbox and kick the other person off.
So what is our goal? Because at the end of the day, you're saying we're going to lose the game, but we're looking for the window. So I wonder how this window look like.
So I think in spite of the fact that social media exists, and it does, that I think we have to play in that field a little bit. I think you have to be there a little bit. But I also think that what we found in the work that we do at Sid Jacobson JCC and lots of JCCs and camps, people really want to be with people. And so I think what we need to do is do what we're doing today, which is bring 200 people at Sid Jacobson JCC to hear from a Jewish author who's writing a book about a character in an old Dickens novel. I think we need to figure out how to bring people together and have interesting, compelling conversations in small ways and in big ways and in person in our communities. Do we need to do that? Do we need to use social media as a means to try to attract some of those people? Sure. But am I going to win an argument with Tucker Carlson or Nick Fuentes or anybody else on social media? I'm not going to. So I think what we need to do is strengthen our communities in small ways and in big ways also. But I think it needs to be in people to people, in educational institutions, in communal organizations, in religious organizations, in our neighborhood associations, if they exist in places. I do not think fighting on a battlefield in which trillions of dollars are being spent and we have millions of dollars, if that's the correct analogy, is a smart battle for us to be fighting. Do we want to stay there a little bit? Sure, but I don't think we need to. I don't think it's realistic for us to do that. I think we need to seed that battlefield and say, let's win in the places where we can win. When people sit with each other and have conversations and find Jewish joy or find communal joy, I think that's where we can win.
Okay, so I like this approach. You're saying that let's strengthen our community, whether it's like the Jewish community and maybe the Jewish and a little bit like neighboring people who are
our
more,
allies, sure.
Yeah. I can understand and I can respect that, but then I cannot not go back and see what you did on NJY camps when you said, okay, this camp is a Zionist camp, okay, which makes total sense for me. But you said that whoever is not agree may leave. Well, I'm saying maybe by letting the people who are not agree or feel discomfort with the term Zionism, the way to bring them closer to us or to bring them closer to the idea of Zionism is to let them stay. So I try to understand this.
Interesting. So what we said was at NJY camps was they didn't have to leave. We wrote a piece, Sam Abudara and and I think it was published in E-Jewish Philanthropy, and then we spoke to other staff. And what we said was, you do not have to be a Zionist to work here. But what you cannot be is actively undermining the mission and the values of this organization. If you do not believe that Israel has a right to exist, you can absolutely work in the kitchen or as a serf, you can do whatever you want. But you cannot espouse those views here because this is a community that believes in a set of values, and those values are important to us. And what we know is that we were able to connect to folks who probably weren't anti-Zionist, to use that term, but had no interest in Israel, or maybe they came with some preconceived notions. And I can think of a number of cases. These are the small wins, courageous of his volume, in which those members, a lot of our staff came from foreign countries, Ireland and England, and places where it's certainly not welcoming to Jews or Israel, in particular Ireland, who ended up going to visit Israel and ended up learning about the country and the people because they got to have individual conversations, because they met people, because they met Israelis. And whatever their thoughts were prior to, they are now Zionists in the true sense of the word. That doesn't mean they're going to move or serve in the IDF, but they are voices in their hometowns. So I think that's much more important than trying to win on social media. And I agree with you. I want to have a conversation with somebody who doesn't agree with the idea of Zionism at some level. But I also want to say to that person, I'm not sure if that's a conversation that I want to expose all my 15-year-olds to, because I'm not sure that you get to have the same platform as I do, because in this place, it's our platform and it's not your platform. I will say the idea of anti-Zionism is challenging for me because I'm not sure why you get to be anti-American, you get to be anti-anything else. That term for me is challenging. And the idea that I have to defend Zionism, to me is a whole nother construct and a conversation that we can have. But to your point, I think there are red lines, which are we can have a conversation as long as that conversation is respectful. And if you start out by saying you're a genocider and your cousins are genociders and the country that you hold dearly, whether you live there or it's part of your Jewish identity, is a colonizer and has no right to exist, I'm not sure that we need to have a conversation because we need to be respectful. And I want to hear what you have to say, but I don't need to give you a platform in a camp or in a JCC. Those are two different things. Having a conversation with somebody is one thing. Giving them a platform is very different.
I really like this example, by the way, because this now I get a more clear view of what this courage versus volume stands for. So you're saying, social media, we might not, probably would not win because of all the reasons that you said, but on the one-to-one conversations that we might have with people who not necessarily agree with our ideas, I put aside Zionism as an idea, but generally in ideas that are related to Israel, to Judaism, to many more ideas. So it's this one-to-one wins.
That's right.
this is what we need to go after. So I really like this example, and thank you for that. And now I want to go to another concept that you also talked about, which is the ownership over renting. So can you explain a little bit about this
sure.
concept?
So I think often what we do in the Jewish communal world, it exists other places, but I was writing specifically about the Jewish communal world, is we don't embrace an idea fully, right? We find the flavor of the day, I'm using another analogy, right? Or we find the thing that's the most interesting and we spend some time on it and we rent it, right? It's not necessarily ours. It's something that we spend some time with and then we move on to the next thing.
Can you explain this concept?
Sure. So let's even talk about Israel, right?
Okay.
We rent for many, many years, if I want to some critique of how we taught Israel in the diaspora, was we rented the idea. So in other words, whether it was in camp or religious schools, talking about supplementary schools after school, you'd have Israel Day, or you'd have an Israel teacher. You'd have somebody who separated the idea of Israel from Jewish life in general, and that was a piece of which you rented, right? Camps are notorious for having Yom Yisrael, Israel Day, Jewish camps. And at some point I said, what does Israel Day mean? There's only one day. We rent the idea for one day. And then the rest of it is American Jewish life. No, we have to own the idea of Israel. We have to dig in, and Israel has to be part of Jewish life, Jewish continuity in America. Every single minute of the day that you're an educational experience like camp, an immersive experience, that's owning the idea versus renting the idea. You don't just spend a minute on it or 24 hours or 8 hours. You have to really own the idea. Owning ideas are harder because they're complicated and you have to figure out not only are the good things. Yom Yisrael is amazing. You get shakshuka, you get music, Omer Adam, it's amazing. But you also have to talk about the downside of owning. Renting a house is great. You go in a house, you live there for 3 years. If there's something wrong, you tell the landlord fixes it. If you own the house, then you're responsible for both the good and the bad. And so I think when you own the idea of Israel, you have to deal with both the positives and the challenges. And so I think that's the idea.
So how does it look like? So there's no Israel Day anymore in camps?
No, I think there is no Israel. I mean, in Michael's perfect world, every day is about Israel, right? Every day there's a piece of Israel. Every day we talk about the importance of Israel to American Jews. Every day, and it doesn't always have to be, God forbid, in camp. It should be a sit-down frontal experience. Every day we play Israeli music. Every day the Israel flag's there. Every day we talk about something that has to do with Israel. It becomes part of the fabric of a life. I'm a Yankee fan, right? If you go into my office, you see a Yankee hat. If you go into my house, then the Yankee game is on. When I'm talking to my son, we're talking about baseball. It is part of I own that idea. So you own that idea. I mean, it's not just like I'm going to go to the Yankee game on July 5th, and that's the day I want to go to the Yankee game, and that's it. That's not, I'm renting that for a little bit, and then I moved on in life. So that's what it looks like. It looks like it is interwoven and it is part of who you are as your identity. And it's inseparable. There is no separate Israel. It's just Israel is part of who you are. Just like you feed 3 meals a day in camp. It's not separate. It's part of the day. You have to eat for 3 meals in camp, or you have to provide a pool in the JCC. That's not an option. We have to have a health and wellness a component. Israel has to be part of what you do every single day, and it has to be something you do continuously and consciously.
Okay, I understand that, but Israel is not the only value that when you're saying
correct
ownership over renting, Israel is not the only value. So I wonder, how does it look like in practice?
Value? Yeah.
In practice, like now for a parent, okay, my age, how does it look like in practice to be an owner of your Judaism, I guess, than what he currently does?
So that's a bigger question, Gal. You're making, this is a harder question, right? Because I don't have the great answer to that question. What do I think it should look like? I think it should look like the idea that Jewish life isn't like soccer, right? So your kids play in a soccer team. Sometimes people own the soccer, which is problematic, but right. So it's not an activity that you do. It's who you are. It's And by the way, how you practice is none of my business. And so I'm not suggesting everyone needs to be observant of mitzvot. That's not what it's about. It's about saying, my Jewish identity is inseparable from who I am. It's how I think about the world. It's the values that I lead with. It's the values I think about. Maybe it's the food I eat. Whether it's kosher or not, it's not the point, right? Not in this particular case. Maybe it's how I think about celebration of holidays. Maybe it's how I talk to my son or daughter about what it means to be a good person. We have 3,000 years of ancient wisdom that shouldn't be in a box on Monday and Thursday or Sunday or Saturday. It should be part of how we think about our interactions in business, our interactions with our spouses, our interactions with our loved ones. There's a rich tradition that exists, and unfortunately, many of us aren't necessarily comfortable with it, and so that's part of the challenge. But I think the idea of having Jewish life as who you are, not a part of who you are, is what I'm talking about when I say ownership.
Do you think that Israelis has this ownership?
Yeah, so I heard this is brilliant. I heard this the other day. Someone was I was listening to a podcast and talking to this, a fairly observant young lady talking about the difference between a religious person in America and an Israeli. And she said, in my house, in my apartment, she's very observant and she dresses in a sneut way, very modest. But she said, but my next door neighbor in America, if you looked at them, they would be non-religious. But they have the Mashiach, Messiah, right? And they have the Rebbe, and they talk about their holidays. Everything about Israelis is Jewish. They own their Jewish identity. Now, there are many Israelis I've met who are very clear about them being secular, but they are secular in a very Jewish way, something that doesn't necessarily exist here in America. They still live by the calendar. Their Jewish values still are part of who they are. They think and talk like a religious Jew here in America. And they may be enormously unobservant, right? In other words, they don't necessarily, the way they think about Jewish life is not Jewish law, halakha. It's just about who they are and how they act. And I think American Jews have a lot to learn about it from Israelis, because often you'll hear American Jews who are observant say, oh, they're secular, they don't know anything. The truth of the matter is that's probably really untrue. Many secular, quote unquote, secular Israelis I've met know as much, if not more, about Jewish life than your average American Jew because you live that life. You know Shavuot and Sukkot, you don't have to think about when it is.
I agree on this specifically. And you know what? Shavuot and Sukkot are good examples, very good examples, because in Israel, you have the kids up from school.
That's right.
So you don't have any.
There's no question.
Yeah, there is no question. You celebrate it because this is a holiday. But you know what? When I came here to the States, I felt that in many ways, I practiced Judaism as a religion in a much stronger way. In Israel, it's crossed right beside me. Yeah, I did all these holidays because it was a holiday, but was I like practicing Judaism even as secular? But what is like practicing Judaism? I don't know. Like this is a good question.
I would say you are, right? So what you're saying is, you're talking about your ritual observance. And I hear this a lot about Israelis. They come to America and they become more ritually observant because it feels like a little bit of home, or it connects them to their Jewishness. Because when you walk in the supermarket in Israel, in Osher or wherever else you go, everyone's Jewish besides our Arab neighbors, but like it's so, right? So you don't have to think about what it means to be Jewish. When you're here in America, you have to stop and think, especially when you're Israeli. I'm sure it's a little bit jarring, even if you live in a town that's very Jewish, because most people are not. And so holding on to religious observance makes you feel a little more grounded. So I would argue with you. I don't think you were more Jewish. I think you were just, the manifestation, the way you were being Jewish was different. But if you look at Israelis, if you even the daily, the week, right? Friday is Shabbat. Saturday is Shabbat. Everyone goes home for family and Shabbat, whether or not no matter what's on the table, whether it's kosher or it's the treifest food in the world, you are home for Friday night dinner. That's a thing that's Jewish. that is uniquely Jewish and it's uniquely Israeli, and it's how you live your life. That's owning Judaism in ways that Americans just don't.
Okay, so if not all Americans will do Aliyah to Israel, unfortunately.
Right.
So how can you own your Judaism here? I mean, like, person like me, working from Monday to Friday.
That's
Friday is a regular day.
Right,
It's very hard to do a Shabbat dinner when it's a regular working day. And, all the other, of course, you know better than me, as we spoke before. So how would you suggest that this owning Judaism will look like?
So I want to be really careful about me imposing my own values and suggestions for people. But here's what I would say. If it's something that's important to you, if you think the continuity of Jewish peoplehood is important, if you want to connect to Jewish life, I think it's like you eat an elephant, one piece at a time. If you come home from Friday, you're going to eat dinner at some point on Friday night. At some point, maybe you do one thing just to make it different, whether it's challah or you light the candles, even if whatever that might be. And I don't want to give rabbinical advice here because God knows I'm not a rabbi. But whatever it is in your life, there's so many options. We used Friday night, even if on Sukkot, even if you're not going to practice traditional religious observance you've talked, build a sukkah or go to someone's house that has sukkah. Ensure that your life is imbued with the values. Pick up a book. You want the next book you want to read? There are lots of interesting books out there about what it means to live a Jewish life. Not from a religious perspective, but what it means to live a holistic Jewish life. Lots of interesting authors have explored this experience. So I think there are lots of different ways, but I think what you have to do is commit to not paying rent payments anymore and get a mortgage. Mortgages are harder, they take longer time, but in the end, you have something of value.
I will take this answer. So we're about to reach the end of our third episode. For me, it ran so quickly, and but we haven't even started to speak about your role as the executive director at Sid Jacobson JCC, a role that you took over almost 6 months ago. So you're kind of new, but already knows a lot of the processes there, the systems there. And I wonder, first of all, it's a very different experience from what you had before. Sure. It's not like running. By the way, if we're talking ownership in compared to renting, JCC is more of a renting of your Judaism than owning it as in campground in a way.
Sure, in that way, sure.
Because campground is an immersive. For 2 months, you only practice Judaism. 100%. Here, you can come to the JCC for 1 hour.
That's right.
Not necessarily even do anything that is Jewish.
Sure.
Just run the treadmill, then go back to your regular life. So I wonder what is on this angle. Yeah. What is your vision? And in a more, what is your vision for the JCC on this angle? Sure. And you know what? I also want to ask in a more particular way, where is Israel placed in your vision for the JCC?
So I think number one is that the JCC should be, everything we should do should be grounded in Jewish values. That doesn't mean if you're not Jewish, you shouldn't be welcome. In fact, it's the opposite, right? Part of what we're supposed to be is Jews as a light unto the nations. So we should create a place, and I don't want to say create because it's created, but we should be thinking about everything we do that's imbued with Jewish values, whether it's kindness or it is caring for folks who are in need or visiting the sick. There are so many values. Or caring for your body. That's a Jewish value, right? There are so many values that we should be thinking about in a Jewish way, through a Jewish lens, and ensuring that the place that we all call home for that period of time, whether it's 1 hour or 50 hours or any place in between, and whether it's at the early childhood center or it's in our dementia care program, wherever that might be, is imbued with Jewish values. That's number one. And number two, the second part of your question is that Israel is a Jewish value. And period, end of stop. So Israel should not be a rented value, it's an owned value. So we think about how we connect social services to Israel, there are some really tangible things. What are the amazing things in social services that are happening in Israel? Israel is becoming a laboratory for post-trauma, unfortunately. What are the things we can learn about how communities are dealing with post-trauma? How about just communities in general? Well, one of the things I learned when I went to Israel post-October 7th was the government was absent and the people were amazing, right? The civil society was as strong as any civil society exists. What can we learn from Israel about building civil society? And so I think that when we think about Jewish life and Jewish values at a JCC, Israel is inextricable. There is no and. It is part of the mix. It is kindness in Israel. It's tzedakah and Israel. It is one of the values that is linked forever, and there's no way of separating it out. There is no Israel Day. There is only every day is Israel Day at the Sid Jacobson JCC.
This is I'm very happy to hear that, of course, coming from my perspective, like the shlichut. And I really want to thank you. I really want to thank you for this conversation, for this fascinating conversation that we had today. All three parts of it. I think there was many ideas that we spoke about, and to be honest, I could continue for another episode if you could, but I guess that we need to close this now. So thank you so much. Good luck on your new role. I'm completely confident that with all your, I don't need to tell you that, but actually with all the history and that you had and all the career trajectory of yours, I'm so glad that you're the one that leading now Sid Jacobson JCC. So thank you also for that. And thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Israeli Bond on hmTv. I really appreciate my guest, Michael Schlank, current executive director of Sid Jacobson JCC, for sharing his insights and stories from a handful of career. And if you enjoyed exploring the information, history, and stories of today's conversation, be sure to check out our other podcasts here on hmTV. Please subscribe, share, and stay connected for more engaging conversations. And until next time, take care and be well.